Okay, all you potty-mouthed parents. Today we're going to be discussing the 5 foulest, most damaging phrases that you don't even know you're using around your children. I'll explain the way you need to clean up your act so you won't pass along these nasty language habits to the next generation. Assuming you grew up around other people, you've unknowingly picked up a whole host of phrases and sayings that you weren't even aware were working their way into your brain. Now, as an adult, you're using these phrases without even knowing that they're there and the potential damage that's being done. It's like a family of raccoons has made a nest up in your attic. Now they're tearing up the insulation, chewing through wires, and just generally making a mess of things. Perhaps the worst part of this entire process is that as we continue to deal with our stresses and as we live our lives, we are using these sayings and passing it along to the next generation. Our children are hearing us use these phrases, and as a result, they're getting the same family of raccoons moving up into their attic. So here's a list of the 5 biggest offenders that I've seen causing problems for people and being passed along to their children. First on our list, I just couldn't handle it if, fill in the blank. This particular phrase is unique to every person who utters it. You have something that you feel you couldn't handle, I have something different that I feel I couldn't handle. But no matter who we are as individuals, and no matter what it is that we believe we couldn't handle, the result is exactly the same. We're left feeling scared, weak, unable to cope, and generally in fear of whatever it is that we can't handle. The question that I have for every single person who utters the phrase, I just couldn't handle it if, is what does that even mean? If this thing that we're fearing actually occurs, what's going to happen? Are you going to poof out of existence? Are you suddenly going to burst into flames? Will the reason for death on your death certificate be listed as inability to handle it? You see, this phrase, in reality, has no meaning. The reality is, no matter what occurs in your life, you will handle it. You may not handle it well, you may not feel like handling it, but you will handle it. Regardless of the occurrence, the sun will come up tomorrow, you will begin a new day. Take a moment and think back on the worst thing that has ever occurred in your life. Now, the interesting thing is, no matter what it is that you're imagining it because it's already passed. You lived through it, you endured it, and perhaps you were one of those individuals who struggled to get out of bed after that event occurred. Perhaps you were one of those individuals who had a lot of relationships fall apart. But whatever bad thing happened, you did handle it. And you learned from it and you grew. And that's the beautiful thing about being a person. No matter what bad thing happens, and no matter how poorly we handle it, we do handle it and we do grow through it. So what we want to do is eliminate this phrase from our vocabulary. The phrase, I just couldn't handle it if, does nothing but make you feel weak, and it's all based on a lie. And we know it's a lie because there is absolutely nobody in the history of humanity who has ever not been able to handle it. We will do what we need to do, we will move forward, and we will grow as a result of the experiences that we have. So rather than just trying to stop saying this useless phrase, what I would rather that you do is replace it with something a little bit more accurate, a little bit more realistic. For this particular one, what I would rather you say is, I really don't want X to happen, but if it does, I'll deal with it as best I can. The second phrase that I'd like to cover is, you think, fill in the blank. In place of you can use absolutely any pronoun you'd like. He thinks, she thinks, they think. All of them are the same. Unless you were bitten by a radioactive spider, or you were born on a planet with a different colored sun, you do not have the ability to know what another person is thinking. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, of course I know that I can't read people's minds. I'm not an idiot. But if you'll stop and actually pay attention to your thoughts, you'll find that you think you can read other people's minds all the time. The reason why I know this is because our brains are designed to help us fill in the blanks, and we are surrounded by blanks constantly. As we go throughout the day, we see people doing things and not understanding why they're doing them. We see people act a certain way and we can't figure out why it is. All of these things are unknown to us. Our brain will naturally and automatically try to give us the reasoning behind why it is that that thing is occurring or why that person is acting the way that they are. This is natural, this is normal, and we need our brains to do that. Unfortunately, it causes huge problems for us because everything that our brain will tell us as far as the reason why this thing is occurring is based upon our own experiences. I look at a situation and I go back through the history of my experiences and I think, based upon what I've learned, this person is acting this way because I fill in the blank. The problem with that is it's not my experiences that are relevant to why that person is acting that way. It's that person's experiences. They are the ones who are able to understand why it is that they're acting the way that they are. My brain will never be able to accurately fill in that missing information. The reality is, we will never be able to know why another person is acting the way that they're acting, or be able to understand why it is that they're doing the things that they're doing. We will never have the full perspective in order to fill in that missing information. The reason why this is such a problem for us as people is because if we think we know what's going on in another person's mind, we will frequently react to whatever it is that we're imagining. That then causes us to get angry or hurt or embarrassed or whatever the emotion is that we may be feeling. This can be problematic because it's based on something we're making up. Rather than jumping to conclusions and thinking that we know something that we can't possibly know, wouldn't it be more beneficial for us to actually stop, pause, and act on the information that we actually do know? An alternative phrase to use in place of he, she, they think is to say something along the lines of he, she, or they appear to think, fill in the blank. I wonder what's actually going on. That little bit of curiosity will make all the difference. It'll stop you from jumping to conclusions about why people are doing what they're doing, or make you feel that you need to act a certain way in response. The next statement that I would love to see people eliminate from their way of thinking and their way of talking would be the simple phrase, I'm so, fill in the blank. And again, we can use whatever pronouns we want here. He, she is, they are, whatever it is, we're talking about labels. This is one of the topics that I bring up that people argue with me more than just about any other. So I want to take some time and talk about why labeling is so problematic. You see, any adjective that we assign to people, any label that we put on another person, including ourselves, is never going to be accurate. You see, people can do smart things and they can do stupid things. People can look beautiful and they can look dreadful. People can do good things and they can do evil things. That being said, people cannot be smart, be beautiful, or be good. Conversely, people also can't be stupid, be dreadful, or be evil. That doesn't mean that people don't do all sorts of evil things all the time. There's simply a huge difference between doing and being. Now, the first argument that people throw at me when they hear this is, well, by doing good, I become a good person, and by doing bad, I become a bad person. If that's the case, then what's the percentage that actually marks a good person? Is it 51%? If I'm at 50.9%, can I round up and just consider myself a good person? If I'm at 51% and I make one mistake, do I now become a bad person? You see, any label that we assign to people is always going to be based on purely subjective rationale, usually that we've made up right then and there on the spot. In reality, labels will never work for people because people are so frustratingly and beautifully inconsistent. No matter what I do today, I can wake up tomorrow and do the exact opposite. Maybe I've lived my life horribly, doing all sorts of bad things all the time. There's nothing stopping me from making a decision at any given moment that I'm going to change, that I'm going to do differently. Now, if I'm in the habit of doing bad things, it becomes less and less likely that I will make that change, but I never lose the ability. No matter how many bad choices I make, I will always have the ability to start making good choices. And that's why we as people will never be set as one thing, good or bad, beautiful or ugly, smart or stupid. Any label we use for people is never going to be accurate. So we need to get in the habit of making a distinction between who a person is and what that person has done or is doing. We can label the things all we want. There are good things, there are bad things, there are smart things, there are stupid things. But those labels cannot work for the individual because every person out there does both good and bad, smart and stupid. That includes us. This is such a vitally important concept because when we mistakenly assign a label to a person instead of to the thing that that person has done, we allow hard feelings to develop towards that individual. That then directly has an impact upon our relationships. This is even worse when we assign those labels to ourselves, because those labels have a significant impact on the way we view ourselves and the value that we assign to ourselves. Rather than assigning labels to an individual, I would love for you to get in the habit of labeling the things that people do and leave the people out of it. So an example of that would be thinking to yourself, that sure was a stupid thing that he just did. Good thing nobody is defined by just one action. Or even better, that sure was a stupid thing I just did. I'm sure lucky that nobody is defined by one action. All right, moving on to the next statement that every parent needs to stop thinking and stop saying in front of their children. I knew this would happen, or this is going to be fill in the blank. Thinking back to what we talked about previously, unless there are radioactive spiders or alien planets in your past, you cannot know the future. You can know probabilities, you can know likelihoods, you can know chances, but none of us knows what's going to happen and how anything will actually play out. Now, of all the bad things that we've been talking about saying today, this may be the one that is the most acceptable to the greatest number of people. Most of us are in the habit of expecting certain outcomes and then believing that we're going to be accurate. The explanation for why we do this is again rooted in the way our brains are designed to operate. Our brains want to keep us safe. They want us to avoid pain and find as much pleasure as possible. As a result, we are on the lookout for anything that could potentially cause us that pain in the future. If we've experienced any sort of pain or unpleasantness in the past, any indication that that might happen again in the future will put us on guard. And the best way our brain knows to help us avoid that potential for pain is to act as though it's a guaranteed, to do whatever we need to do in order to avoid that negative outcome. So even though we don't know what's going to happen, our brains will make us think that we do. Now, although all of us would agree that we don't have the ability to predict the future and to see what's actually going to happen, I'm sure some of you are thinking to yourself the argument that I've heard over and over again from people. And that is, by expecting a bad outcome, I'm actually protecting myself so that when that bad thing happens, I won't be as hurt or I won't be as disappointed. Now, the big problem with that is, unfortunately, it's just dumb and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In reality, when a bad thing happens, do you ever think to yourself, well, good thing I was expecting that, now it doesn't bother me? Of course not. None of us is actually excited because of a bad thing happening simply because we expected that bad thing to happen. Conversely, if a good thing happens, we're not happy because we expected the bad thing, we're happy because the good thing happened. It may seem pretty obvious, but research has actually been done that has shown that people will be happy when good things happen, and they will be upset when bad things happen without any input or influence from their expectations. What that means for us is that when we sit back expecting bad things to happen, all we're doing is allowing ourselves to feel the bad feelings sooner. We will still feel bad when we get that bad outcome that we are expecting, but we've now had the pleasure of feeling horrible while awaiting for it. And then, of course, there's the possibility that that bad thing won't actually occur, and then we felt all of those bad feelings for absolutely no reason. What we should do instead is recognize that we don't actually know what's going to happen. Again, we may have an understanding of the likelihood. We may have an understanding of what may occur. But we need to temper our expectations with the fact that we can't know for certain what will happen. So rather than telling ourselves or speaking out loud the fact that we know something bad will be occurring, an alternative statement would be, I could be getting some crap news today, only one way to find out what will actually happen. And that brings us to the last item on our list of things that all parents should stop saying around their children immediately. The word should. Now, you use this word countless times every day, and I have a simple question for you. Can you define it? I have asked that question of countless individuals over the years, and I've never once received an accurate definition of such a simple word that we all use all the time. What does should mean? Most people take a stab at it and say that should means something that they really want to happen. But isn't it more than that? If we tell our children that they should clean their room, or if we tell ourselves that we should handle things a different way, are we saying simply that I would like it if that occurred? No, it's something a little more than that, isn't it? And what most people do when trying to give a definition for the word should is they use the word should in the definition. Well, should means something that I should go do. And as we know, you can't define a word by using that word in the definition. So what does the word should actually mean? Dictionary.com gives a very straightforward, very simple definition. Simple past tense of shall. Now, where do we see the word shall? We see it places like the law or in the Bible, other scriptures. God says that what we shall do. The law says what we shall do. It's a command. So should is simply a command in the past tense. So I tell my child that they should have cleaned their room. I am commanding them to have cleaned their room. But they still didn't. I tell myself what I should have done. I should have gone to bed earlier last night. I command myself to have gone to bed earlier last night. And yet I didn't. It's actually a really simple question that we need to ask ourselves. How can we command the past to be different than it actually was? Obviously, we can't. What this means is that the word should is really quite meaningless. It references something that could have been in the past, but wasn't. When we use the word should, we are trapping ourselves in a world that never existed, no matter how much we wanted it to, and we ignore the reality that at some point we need to deal with. I need to deal with the fact that my child did not clean their room when I told them to. I have to deal with the fact that I didn't go to sleep last night when I needed to, and now I'm going to be tired throughout the day. And all of this is when we're using the word should properly in the past tense. Many, if not most, if not all of us, use the word should improperly when talking about the future. We walk around issuing edicts as if we have the right to command the world to be a certain way. Remember, should is the past tense of shall, which is a command. So when I'm telling my spouse what she should be doing, or when I'm telling people at work what they should be doing, I'm in essence telling them that I have commanded things to be a certain way. Imagine my shock and my frustration when the universe just doesn't comply with the things that I expect or the things that I deem to be necessary. We are creating more frustrations for ourselves by using the word should than is ever really necessary. Instead of using the word should either properly in the past tense or improperly in the present or future tense, I would encourage you to be more realistic in the way that you're thinking and in the way that you're talking. Rather than issuing edicts about the way the past should have been, or trying to give commands to the way things shall be now and in the future, talk about what you actually want, or what you're going to do if things aren't a certain way. Rather than saying, you should have cleaned your bedroom, I can remind my child that I told them to clean their bedroom, they didn't do that, and here's now the consequence for that. I don't need to get frustrated by saying what they should have done. I need to deal with the reality of the fact that it wasn't done the way I directed. When I look at situations in which I don't have the ability to command, dealing with my spouse, dealing with things at work, I can pause and say, rather than saying the way things have to be, I can share what I would like them to be. So the alternative statement that I'd like you to practice using in your mind and in your speech is something along the lines of, this is the way that I would like it to be. But I recognize I don't always get what I want. You'll find your levels of frustration significantly decreasing and much more satisfaction and happiness in your life. This is the perfect spot in the video for me to act as a hypocrite and tell you that you should like this video, you should subscribe to it, and you should turn on those notifications so you know exactly when we post new content. All of these things are going to make you happier and a better parent, so you definitely should be doing each and every one of them. And that brings us to our 3, 2, 1 for today. 3 things that I think are the most important takeaways from today's video. 2 minutes for you to think about how these things apply for yourself, and then the one thing that you're going to take out and practice starting today. The first important thing that I want everybody to take away from this video is the idea and the concept that even common phrases can have a significant impact on the way that we feel as we live our lives and as we deal with stresses and the frustrations that we all encounter every single day. It's common for us to use so many of these phrases without ever stopping to think about what it's actually doing to us and to our emotional state. I would encourage you to stop and think about the way that you phrase things in your thoughts and in the way that you talk to yourself and to other people. The second thing to take away from today's video is the idea and the concept that the more you use these phrases without thinking about them, the more of a habit they'll become, both for you and for your children. The reason why almost all of us are in the habit of using all 5 of the phrases that we talked about today is because we've heard them used constantly and consistently throughout our lives. We were raised by people using these phrases, we have allowed ourselves to use these phrases, and we've never once really learned how significant the impact can be upon us and upon our functioning. We don't want to pass that along to our children. Get yourself in the habit of thinking more truthfully and more realistically, and you'll then pass along those habits to your children. Third, little changes in the way that you think and in the way that you speak can pay big dividends in the way that you feel as an individual and the way you go about helping your children. We are all at the mercy of the way that we perceive the world, and the way that we speak directly shapes the way those perceptions are formed. So I would encourage you to put the effort into those small things that you can change in order to get the big benefits that come from a more realistic view of the world and of yourself. Now I'd like you to take just a couple moments, either by pausing the video or waiting until you finished watching it, to think about how these concepts are applicable to you and in your life. Which of the 5 things that we talked about today would have the biggest impact upon you and on the way you parent your children? Which of the things that we talked about would be the best first step in order to get the biggest payday when it comes from making that change? It's going to be different for every single one of us. So take the time and think about, for you specifically, where are you going to get the biggest bang for your buck? Now that you've taken those couple minutes, I want you to pick that one thing that you're going to be focused in on. What one thing can you start working on today so that you can start seeing the benefits in the way that you're parenting your children and the way that you're feeling in your own personal life? Once you've selected that one thing, share it in the comments. Write it down so that we can all share with each other where we're working and what we're doing in order to improve ourselves. As with previous videos, I'll be going through those comments and what people share, the one thing that they're going to be working on, and I'll be selecting at least one person that I'm going to be following up with individually. I'll make contact with that person and see what help I can offer. What assistance can I provide that may help them to move forward and succeed in that one change they're trying to make? Well, that wraps up our video for today. 5 things that all parents should stop saying immediately so as not to pass on their nasty language habits to the next generation. You've got homework to work on, so I'm going to let you get to it. Take care. Thank you for your time in watching today's video. I hope you got something beneficial and you're going to start practicing right away. Don't forget that you can always go to our channel homepage and find all of our past videos, all of the things that are going to be beneficial in helping you to become a better, more stable, and happier parent.